Hey, what is going on, guys? I've been getting a lot of questions about what my settings are for Rewind, Royale, yeah, I'm so G, as well as Reload. So in today's video, we're going to do a settings walkthrough of both my general settings as well as my controller settings in this new system. Do keep in mind, I purposely configure my settings inherently to not be optimal for this new system to make it easier to alternate between the old Chapter 1 system and this system. So if you only play with the new system, you only play Chapter 5 Battle Royale, Reload, Rewind Royale, this is probably not the way to go, so just keep that in mind. This is more of a settings walkthrough and kind of how I have it set up rather than a pure guide. Okay, so in terms of video settings, I still use windowed full screen because it makes it easier to switch between my other windows while I'm playing. I am using the performance mode. I tried to use DX11, DX12, I found performance to be really terrible, so I ended up using performance mode. It's basically, if you want to be more competitive, you're going to want to use performance mode, but it's totally fine to use the DX11 or DX12 if you prefer your game to look nicer. So I have maximum view distance, but everything else on low, basically just to maximize FPS. Let's move on to our audio settings. Here they are here. One thing to note is I do use visualized sound effects. So Season 7 and before, I don't recommend you use visualized sound effects as it disables your actual audio. Season 8 to at some point in Chapter 3 or 4, I really don't know exactly when it happened, but at that point, you have sound, but it's mono. So it's kind of a 50-50 choice where you can go either way. And then at some point, it changed to where you do get stereo audio, even with visualized sound effects. So I basically say you should always run it in this new system. And then let's move to our general settings here. So just a couple things of note. The first one is, of course, auto pickup weapons. I do use auto pickup weapons. I find that generally it helps, win those 50-50s with chess. Something to keep in mind. And then preferred item slot, I go shotgun slot 1, AR, utility consumable, and then SMG. Now, why do I have shotgun slot 1? The reason why is because, at least in Chapter 1, and I believe this is still a thing even in today's Fortnite, when you take a wall with your pickaxe, replace it, and then try to pull your gun, you can only go to slot 1 or slot 5 instantly. So, I do think, definitely in Chapter 1, you need to have your shotgun in slot 1 if you want to take advantage of that. So, it's just much more natural to me to use the same inventory configuration as I do in Chapter 1 projects. Moving on through movement, just here's kind of my settings. I haven't really played around with these, more modern settings like Mantle and Hurdle. You don't even have those in Rewind Royale, so they're kind of irrelevant there anyway. Obviously you have turbo building. No reason to have pre-edits. That's pretty useful. And I do use auto-confirm for both editing and resetting. I find it much more reliable. Yes, you can probably be theoretically faster without it if you're really good. That's up to you, but I think if you're not insane with builds, it's probably a good idea to use auto-confirm edits and auto-reset as well. Okay, and then we have tap to search on, all this stuff. I haven't really messed with this. Moving on to the game UI, I do use the list. I don't think list is better. It's probably actually better to use cumulative, but it's much more natural for me to use list because in Chapter 1, you only have list. So making things as similar as possible between this and Chapter 1 really helps make the transition easier. So that's why I have it set up like that. I do use the reticle ammo indicator, though. I do find that helpful, even though it doesn't exist in Chapter 1. I find it kind of nice to have. And some things like quest progress, I don't really care about that too much, so I just turn that off. And I do have net debug stats, so you can see the ping. Okay, moving on to touch controls. I don't use those, so we're going to skip that. And then mouse and keyboard, I don't use that either, so we're going to skip that. One thing to note, though, if you're having issues where your controller's not being detected, make sure lock input method as mouse is off, because that can cause serious problems if you have it on. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, so moving on to controller here. So this is really where it's going to come into play, where I have this set up to match Chapter 1 rather than being purely optimal. So edit hold time is pretty irrelevant. Builder Pro build immediately. You need that on. That is mandatory. Slide hold time, I haven't adjusted that at all. I don't use vibration. Generally, I don't see any advantage to that. It's just shaking your controller. If you find it more fun to use it, though, go right ahead. Haven't really messed with this. Okay, here's the important part. So sensitivity, I use a 1.5, 1.4. This is actually a little bit higher than I use in EasyFN Season 7, but you have to keep in mind in EasyFN, I play at extremely high ping, so it's very hard to build, but at low ping, when I'm playing with like 10 or less ping, I could probably get away with going a bit higher, but I want to keep it consistent between Season 7 and Rewind Royale. 4757 is exactly the same as 77 in the old system. I did make videos on how to convert between the two systems if you're curious. So there's that. I don't have any boosts. Boosts do not exist in Chapter 1, to my knowledge, so it's best to keep them off to keep it consistent. 3239, this is equivalent to a 0.68 ADS multiplier on 7.7 base. Honestly, I think this is too high for the modern aim assist, because this is really designed for L2, right? It's designed to be pretty similar to your base, so when you alternate base, ADS, when you're L2 spamming, it feels natural. But with the new system, this is honestly a bit too high, but I'm going to keep it the same as I have it with Chapter 1, because that just feels most natural to me. Now, one thing that I don't have look dampening time to match, I should actually put it to 0.20 seconds, but my settings have been 0.0 for a long time now, ever since I switched to the new system. And it probably would be better if I switched back to 0.20, but I'm just going to leave it at 0.0 because that's just how I've been playing for a long time. Just something to keep in mind that if you want to match the Chapter 1 system exactly, you should play with 0.20 look dampening time. And that may be something I might try doing. And of course, if you want to match the Chapter 1 system, you definitely need to use exponential. And then my dead zones are the same as EasyFN 1212. That's going to depend on your controller and how much stick drift you have. And I don't use foot controller, and I haven't really played Rocket Racing. Okay, one thing that's actually really important here. This is not in Rewind Royale, but this is super annoying in Fortnite nowadays, where both sticks steer vehicles. It is so awkward to try and use, and I'm really glad you can change it with the tank. If you turn it off, that means you only steer with the left stick, which is how every vehicle should work. But sadly, many vehicles steer with both sticks, which I just find infuriating. So just something, I would actually recommend you turn this off. I find it a lot more natural to drive around. Okay, in terms of our binds, unfortunately this system, it's very hard to visualize what my binds are. But essentially, just to go over the gist of it, I put my 4 paddles are linked to the D-pad, and then I put my key buttons, like reload, edit, pickaxe, and build, all on the D-pad so I have instant access. That allows me to do is put secondary functions like map, which I put an X, and inventory on A, on the face buttons, which I find easier to hit than the D-pad. So, you know, that's only going to work, though, if you play with paddles. If you play with claw, you need to put your core functions on A, B, X, Y, and if you play with standard no paddles and no claw, you also need to put them on A, B, X, Y. Pretty much my buttons are exactly identical to how they are in EasyFN. The one difference is in reload, I had put sprint on A, and then moved inventory to Y, so I could hit sprint more easily. But Rewind Royale doesn't have sprint, so I reverted that and put it back to the way it was before. So I'll just kind of scroll through my settings here at a medium speed, just so you can see every bind if you're curious. But again, this is really meant to match Chapter 1, the Chapter 1 system. So it may not be 100% optimal for this new system, but we'll just kind of scroll through. And then Rocket Racing, I've never played that, so this is all kind of irrelevant. And yeah, so I hope this video is interesting, and I'll catch you in the next one.